Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and a whole bunch of other venues. Just visit our sites, chimeraobscura.com/VM or vmspod.com to find more information, along with our RSS feed. And follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod. Oh, it's been a weird week. I got back from a trade show in Philadelphia last Wednesday, and as soon as this episode is up, I'm off to another trade show in New York City. After so little travel for so long, back-to-back show weeks can be a little disorienting. I'm not saying I've got a tough job or anything like that. It's literally just hanging out in a trade show exhibit hall and schmoozing with people, but it's just getting back into the swing of things. I mean, last week's show went great. I saw lots of people, confirmed the status of a couple of member companies I wasn't exactly sure about, because you don't want to email someone and ask them about the invoice and find out that they don't want to renew. And so getting to see people in person sort of helped with that. I even got to catch up with my sister-in-law for a bit. She was in town for another conference, and she'd happened to mention it on Instagram. So we connected and got to hang out and sort of catch up for a little while. Also, don't ask how it happened. I screwed up at 30th Street Station and boarded the wrong train. This all worked out fine. It was still headed up to Newark, but also the one I was ticketed for wound up running 25 minutes late, but still, it was kind of embarrassing. The upshot of the whole thing is that I took a COVID test this morning at home and discovered I'm still negative, which is pretty difficult to imagine, given that maybe 5% of the people in the exhibit hall were masked up during this trade show. And I was, of course, and almost no one on the train, including the guy who sat down next to me on the train down, or the person who was sitting next to me on the accidental train back up. But anyway, I did get some bad news also while I was at the show. One of our mutual pals told me that my former boss of 15 years had just had open heart surgery. I texted him and found out he was just getting home and he's recovering well. They found the whole heart issue while readying him for knee surgery, testing to make sure he'd be okay to undergo that. Anyway, he's about a dozen years older than me, and when he texted me back during my trip home to thank me and let me know how he was doing, he wrote, "Life keeps throwing curveballs, and the problem is I'm a fastball hitter." But I got worse news about a friend's wife who had, I learned, just gone into hospice after a colon cancer discovery last year. We have a bunch of mutual friends at the trade show. He's in the business and he's known a lot of people, and they filled me in on that. And my friend announced his wife's death this morning in this long Facebook post that Amy shared with me. And he wrote about all the things they did between her diagnosis and her death, both the medical stuff and the life, the living they tried to cram in while they still had the time, like this vacation to Hawaii between rounds of chemo and what her last days were like. And I was at their wedding. We were at their wedding, Amy and I, and I'm just so sad for him. And I've had a bunch of emails this morning from work pals, some of the people I talked to last week and others, everyone, letting me know and a lot of them are local to him. He lives in a kind of out of the way city. And, I don't know, that part of it makes me glad that there are a lot of people near him to offer support. Like, besides family, there's the work family, and she was part of the industry also. And, all these people are going to be there for him. So that's something. I mean, they're the same age as me. And just like my leukemia diagnosis, she had no signs before a routine colonoscopy where they came back and said, yeah, this is not good. You need chemo right away. And she lasted less than a year. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. It's part of my life, and this is where I share some of that. So that's what I'm doing. I promise the show itself will be more upbeat. In fact, let's get to it right now. My guest this time is Alvin Eng, who is the author of the new memoir, Our Laundry, Our Town, My Chinese American Life from Flushing to the Downtown Stage and Beyond. It's published by Fordham University Press, came out last week. Alvin's a playwright in New York, first-generation American of Chinese heritage, and a acoustic punk raconteur, as he describes himself. Now, Our Laundry, Our Town it's a fun, heartfelt memoir of Alvin's upbringing in 1960s and 1970s Queens, and then the life he carves out for himself in the arts and the ways we reconcile ourselves to our past, I guess. Alvin's parents both emigrated from China when that was not a very easy process. And they both faced, we'll just say, trauma and upheaval before getting here. And then had to, once they were together, figure out how to build a secure life for their kids while still hearkening back to who they were. Now, Alvin manages to relate the stories of his upbringing with good humor, but, without making jokes at the expense of his parents. Some of the stuff they do is pretty funny. Often the jokes turn out to be on Alvin a lot, but he manages over the course of the book to show what it's like growing up in the weird, that sort of interstitial world between Jewish and Gentile Flushing, and how he finds his place in sports and music and eventually finds his true calling in theater, especially musical theater, by way of some bombastic rock and roll. And he really, over the course of the book, manages to get into the tension between responsibility to family and to oneself, and how the American, especially New York, notion of self-invention, what it really means, and how it plays out in the course of his and his family's lives. In some respects where you get to self-invent yourself, but only so much, depending on where you're from and what you look like. And the book gets at a lot of the challenges of being the youngest son, which he is, and of having a mother who never learns English, and of trying to explore his Chinese roots, and in the process really learns that he's going to be other, whether he's in America or China. But, all of that comes together and makes Our Laundry, Our Town a really entertaining book, especially in the tone and voice which Alvin writes. And as I point out at the outset of this, things that may seem like an alien experience can turn out to have a lot of common elements with your own life, or maybe it's just mine. Either way, go check out Our Laundry, Our Town, which is out from Fordham University Press. Now here's Alvin's bio from the book. Alvin Eng is a native New York City playwright, performer, acoustic punk raconteur, and educator. His plays and performances have been seen off-Broadway throughout the United States, as well as in Paris, Hong Kong, and Guangzhou, China. He is the interviewer/editor of the oral history/play anthology Tokens, the New York City Asian American Experience on Stage. His plays, lyrics, and memoir excerpts have also been published in numerous anthologies. Alvin's spoken word videos, songs, storytelling, and commentary have been broadcast and streamed on National Public Radio, among other venues. He is a two-time appointee to the Fulbright Specialist roster of Theater U.S. Studies Scholars and a three-time recipient of the NYSCA, NYFA Fellowships. His new book is Our Laundry, Our Town. Also, Alvin turned 60 today, so happy birthday, old man. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Alvin Eng. I do want to say, before we get to, talking about the book itself, there are, weirdly, a bunch of parallels in our lives, which really came up over the course of reading Our Laundry, Our Town. We have very different upbringings and ethnicity and all that, but we are both first-generation Americans. For both of us, now I live in northern New Jersey, about 25 miles from New York. Mm-hmm. We both have the city as that thing. And we both listened to Tommy way too young for where we should have been emotionally. I'm younger than you, but I was listening to it at 8 or 9 years old. And looking back, I realized that may not have been, emotionally the best thing for me.
No. Pete Townsend, he had a direct signal right into us with Tommy.
Yeah, and it's really a wrong thing. But let's jump from that into the book itself. Tell me about writing a memoir and when you felt like it was time, given that, you've addressed in some of your stage performances parts of your life. What was it like, sort of committing it to the page?
Sure. As mentioning the Who and Tommy and everything, my whole creative, let's say, beginnings was first being a music fan, a rock band, punk rock band, then a punk rock participant. And what I always loved, I always saw songwriters and playwrights as being very, very similar. I feel like our plays and songs can be interpreted in all different ways, into different genres, different styles, and so I felt like after years of touring, if you will, it was time to make an album, a more permanent version of this. And this started as I first started like I just loved coming of age when we did. I think I'm a little bit older, but after the punk rock years, I realized I had more facility with words than music, though I still love my 3.5 chords. I realized the audience was not enjoying it as much as I was. I and then I worked in the music business for a while. But then I started seeing performance art, and I said, there's a place for this crazy raw commentary, like through performance art and downtown theater, besides a 3-minute song. And or if it's the New York Dolls, a 2-minute song before it's. Yeah. And so I started writing monologues and performing that way. But then I never did anything self-referential until someone said, you should take part in this thing called Telebration, a storytelling thing. I was like, just talk about myself? I was like, oh my God. And then it really took to that form. I said, because I realized going back to even if many rock and roll performers and songwriters were creating personas, what it appeared to us in the pre-MTV generation, yes, you had to leave your house, your apartment to actually go somewhere to experience rock and roll. You felt, unlike other mediums, you felt there was an authenticity there, that singer-songwriter, that person was really saying what they believed, was speaking directly to you. There was no filters. And then what I found in storytelling, I found something similar with that. So I did the first longer piece was way back in the 90s, there was this marathon piece on Broadway called The Kentucky Cycle. So it was like a two-night opus. I said, okay, as our British friends would say, let's take the piss. And I said, I'll call my piece The Flushing Cycle, so about growing up in Flushing. And so I worked on that. And then that got some good acclaim. I did it started, of course, I was still in Queens. I lived in Flushing until 2002. And so our local theater was the Queens Theater in the Park on the World's Fairgrounds next to all those historic sites. And then took it into the city, the Pan Asian Repertory Theater in Dixon Place, places like that. And that got some good acclaim. And then I guess another thing that really made me see the world very differently was in 2002, my mother passed away, and that was the passing of my second parent. And at least for me, it really was a different world then. We pulled up my Flushing roots. I moved to Jersey City. Actually, I lived in Jersey City for a while. So, and it was great. It was all people who were priced out of Manhattan. So it was a great area, And for it's true. It's in the book where, for some reason, the play Our Town just stood out. So I was unpacking all my books and putting them on a bookshelf. And I read it, and this time I'd seen it in the 80s, like the version where some people were screaming bloody murder, where Spalding Gray was the stage manager, and he was doing things like Grover's Corners, nice town, don't you think? And really roll his eyes, and I was laughing. People going, oh my God, do you believe he's doing this? So that it hit me on one level then, but then after a second parent died, just to me, Our Town was profound. And I said, I'd like to try to attempt something where just to sort of eulogize, if not immortalize our families, and particularly my parents' journey. And that became the second self-referential theater piece called The Last Emperor of Flushing. And that got a lot of acclaim then too. And then so I did that for a number of years at many different places. And then And then coming full circle in teaching about our town, I learned that that our town actually has Chinese artistic influence. I don't know if there's a great series of letters between Gertrude Stein and Thornton Wilder, and I love that she calls him Thorny, as only she can. Dear Thorny, about this, but and just the level of openness is incredible. In a letter back, Thornton Wilder writes, for my next play, I'm stealing all the ideas from part 3 of The Making of Americans, along with the idea of the property manager from Chinese opera. I was like, oh my God, so the stage manager is really the Chinese opera property manager, filtered through Thornton's system. And further research, he spent a lot of his childhood in China because Thornton Wilder's father was a consul general to both Hong Kong and Shanghai. So he was exposed to a lot of Cantonese and Peking opera as a child. And they came back in our town, and flash forward to about late 2008 or 9. My wife and I, we work together sometimes. So we applied for a Fulbright residency where we could teach Chinese students about this. And we got one for City University of Hong Kong. And it was fascinating to do that. One of the first things they said was the Chinese students, are these couples in New England, are they arranged marriages too? I was like, wow. It says a lot about that. And then through that residency at City University of Hong Kong, where it was called Our Town, Hong Kong, USA, where the students, we first studied Our Town, and then they wrote and performed their own self-referential plays in response. But while we were there, because we were there on a Fulbright, the U.S. consulate in Guangzhou invited me to perform The Last Emperor of Flushing in Guangzhou, which is sort of like that's sort of like the Manhattan to our Flushing. That's like the bigger city there, Yeah. And just doing that, I felt like, okay, now this is almost like a capstone experience of this period of my life. Where I think there's enough here for a book now, and then that made me really say, okay, in addition to wanting to make an album, a permanent version of this for years after years of touring, I said, okay, this is something now too. I think I've got hopefully the meta, the global experience, and the personal experience where just Our Town at so many levels. I bring these stories back, and it was bizarre to be performing in English, but it was sponsored by the U.S. consulate, so I presume there was a big English-speaking portion of the audience. So that made it really say, okay, this can really be a book form now.
Yeah, I did wonder from your depiction of it in the book whether the audience, whether they knew, how much English they had, and whether you had moments where you could gauge from the audience reaction as to how many of them actually, got what you were saying.
Yes, it was very different because as I said, in many, like whenever I performed in America, it was always really trying to show the impact of being a child of immigrants, how it impacted my whole outlook and my way through the world. But yet in China, you felt like it was almost like, okay, I have to impact how being an American and really reflected on the Chinese experience. So it was almost like a little inversion there.
But at what point did you realize, and again, this is going to draw back to my own bizarro life experiences, at what point did you realize like your life and family upbringing was different than those of your friends and the pals and both the Gentiles and the Jews you knew in the various neighborhoods that you depict in Flushing?
Right. No, I guess it really was. Well, that was true. They were. It was. As a child, I was born in '62. Yes, I'm throwing cautions into the ageism wind.
Yeah.
Yes,
I've only had one or two guests who refused to mention the year they were born in conversation. It was one of those like, surely that's not an issue. Like, it's an issue. I'm like, okay, never mind. But yeah, 62. So.
Yes. So depending when this airs, I'm only 59 until May 24th. So I'm not sure. And I share a birthday with Bob Dylan and Patti LaBelle. So I'm very happy about that.
Nice.
Yes. And so as a child, so growing up, I felt like we were still in the end of the Cold War. So it is, people would sometimes open the door and scream these horrible things at my parents. So I had an inkling that things were very different, even as a small child. And then of course, maybe the kicker was when you in school, I guess the first days in kindergarten and everything, when they go around the room and say, "And what are your parents' names?"
Yeah.
And I was saying, well, my it was more like the romanization of these sounds, but he, for some reason, I guess my father's name was Ginghua, but he or whoever was, I guess, taking him in at Angel Island or Ellis Island was just romanized it as Kinghua Eng, King, and everyone says, "Your father's a king." I was like, no. and then your mother's a toy, or your mother's toy line is her name. It's like, so that really rubbed in. I said, oh, this is tough. I dreaded that every year. And what are your parents' names?
Yeah. It reminds me of a kid. Gosh, I think his parents were Albanian, and we were 13, 14 years old in Spanish class, and you're supposed to name your parents, and he pretended he didn't know his father's name, which is Vladimir. I knew it because they were friends of the family, but I just had that moment of, boy, Mark is really getting freaked out by this parent question, and I could see that was where you're coming from. Just another, you don't quite fit into standard culture, I guess.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And when we were growing up, it was there was even if it was a misperception, it seemed like there was one way to be an American, and we all wanted to be that. And I mean, I regret it now. Of course, when you're young, you just want to fit in with what's around you. So I rebelled. I refused to learn to speak Chinese and everything, And also, I think this is aided and abetted by the fact that, for better or for worse, but I'm the youngest of 5, and it's quite a stretch. Like my oldest brother is 15 years older than me. So I think by the time I came around, my parents were just tired. They'd been through so much. So,
dude, even the second child, trust me. My brother got the orthodonture, the Boy Scouts, all that. By the time I came around, it was, just don't let him burn himself to death or anything. He'll be okay.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you can take the 7 train CBGBs, come back 2 in the morning. Yeah, no problem. Just don't wake us up. Oh, so even the second child, that's interesting to hear. So after 4 kids, then me, you can just imagine.
Yeah, at that point, it's just, again, they're on their own. But yeah, that sense of, you term it as longing to belong in the course of the book, that sense of wanting to fit, and the things you now regret over, trying too hard, or not getting what it meant to be authentically you, I guess.
Yes, and then of course I always say, like, throughout life the questions remain more or less the same, but hopefully the answers are always different. And I guess in one way or another, we're always longing to belong. Hopefully it's always different things as we through our journey. But yes, that never goes away, of course. But as a child, it was everything. And then later on, even talking to friends from gay and lesbian friends, they would say, "Well, we could always stay in the closet when it was convenient or helpful us, where you didn't have that option." It's like, yeah, that's true. I always had.
I use protective coloration everywhere, and I just think, you can't do that. You're visually, you're not going to be able to do the things that I can do to try to blend in. But,
right.
But yeah,
that's why it led us to like. All people feel other or outside, or gravitate towards the arts, and then rock and roll. And for my generation, when I came of age, it was a real punk rock scene, and it felt like finally there was a place where it said, okay, no, I'm going to celebrate my otherness. I'm going to say, yes, I am different, and I embrace it, and I'm going to put it in your face. So that was a very healing thing at that time. But then, as I write about in the book, then I discovered just seeing the word again, just hearing, I didn't hear the song, just hearing about that song, Chinese Rocks, just freaked me out. I was like, what? How could this come to the party? How could this happen?
And then you discover it's all about drugs, and it's okay. But
no, absolutely. and that led to a deeper thing. Like, it's in the book's called Chinese Rocks, but I've since started working on another now that we're older, I call myself an acoustic punk raconteur. And the discovery that's in the book, in the chapter called Chinese Rocks, I learned that in digging deeper, it is about written by 2 of my famous, God bless their souls, punk rock junkie punky heroes. It was written by Dee Dee Ramone and the great Johnny Thunders from the New York Dolls. Chinese Rocks is just about going out to score heroin, China white heroin. And then I learned that the impact of heroin and opium for the opium wars and the whole Chinese diaspora. And then in my own family, my grandfather was an opium addict, and he died of an opium overdose in the streets of New York's Chinatown. So that led me to thinking about how growing up when I did, we idolized a heroin chic junkie. We always wanted to be. No one wanted to be an addict, but everyone wanted to act as if they were a heroin chic junkie, like Keith Richards, Johnny Thunders, Lou Reed. And that got me thinking about all these things. So that's why a newer piece is called Here Comes Johnny Yen Again, or How I Kicked Punk. And it's just looking at that same issue. So that started from the research in this book about that.
Yeah, what was the difference for you between, again, making an album, writing for the page versus writing for stage? What did you have to change, I guess, about your writing process, or how much of this feels like a monologue versus this could only be, written text?
Right. Of course, it's in some ways you're under much more tremendous scrutiny, because in live theater, it's live, it happens, it keeps going. But here, of course, people go back to it on their own level. But that was also very attractive, because growing up, always loved listening to albums too, and I just wanted that one-to-one intimacy where, of course, theater will always be sacred. We're all, to me, it's literally common ground. We're all in the same room, breathing the same air, and you're really just exchanging the same energy to each other. And obviously, the audience's energy fuels every performance. It really is a collaboration. But then also, what I love about books and about records, see, I still call them records or CDs.
Yeah, I know. I use the same thing. We're old. I'm 1971, but we're old.
No, thank you. Yeah, well, welcome to the club. I've been old for a while, And I just love the intimacy where you can experience that on your own time and in your own space, wherever you like, in your bedroom, whatever it is a special spot for you. And you're under, it's a different kind of intimacy and a vulnerability. So I really thought about that, how to work that on the page. And also, obviously, when you're on stage, you have all the physicalities, you have inflections, all of that. And how do you capture those nuances for the page? So it was that way. But also, you're right. Dialogue is very different. Of course, there's a lot of dialogue in prose, but particularly, I guess the monologue form is most transferable, if you will, to prose and the page. So, just thinking about that, just really, hopefully, thinking that this will have what I love about theater is it is a very ephemeral art form, but books are more permanent. So you really think a lot more about that.
Yeah. I wondered with the sort of verbal rhythms of a spoken monologue versus what you'd write for the page, and whether you found yourself falling into some of the same writing, again, we'll just say rhythms and meters, I suppose, that you have when you're working on a monologue.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Being newer to a long form book, it was I'm sure the first few drafts, I was thinking, okay, this is what a memoir should sound like, what it should read like, and then you hopefully get to put your own voice back into that.
When you mentioned, by the way, being the fifth child, as far as immigrant experience goes, I know your father died when you were only 14. Parents' expectations of what you were going to do with your life? I mean, there never seemed to be an indication that you're going to take over the laundry or anything like that. But was there ever a sense of, life in the arts? Either, we embrace this, or he's number 5 son. It's okay.
Right. There was always I guess since the 60s, there was always a garage in our band. Excuse me, there was always a band in our garage. There was a garage in the band too. There was always a band in our garage. So I guess in that way, they tolerated it. They never told them to stop doing it. And I guess one thing, like, it's also in the book, where they like to listen to their Cantonese opera records really loud too. So that was one thing. They would drown out Tommy with it was like a battle of the operas, the Cantonese opera versus the rock opera. And in our laundry, the Cantonese opera always won.
Right.
Yeah.
Even over the great Pete Townsend Kerrang!
Yes, exactly.
At the beginning of Pinball Wizard. But,
no, absolutely. Yeah. And every time John Entwistle shakes the room with his bass, every time, And so at least I knew that there was something there. And looking back, my mother often had her little life lessons, if you will. She was always rhyming. So I guess my mom was the first with the loud music and the spoken word right in the house. So we had a lot of that. But again, for better or for worse, there was never talk of, they wanted me to work in the laundry while I was a kid, and I had to. But there was never talk of, you'll take this over. And the arts, they really, I guess in some ways too, it was another thing that's, when I started really dressing up and acting out during my punk years, my mom just sort of put that in context. When the first time I came back with my Freddie Mercury inspired black nail polish on my hands, she just looked at me and said, "Ha ha ha, Batman."
I laughed so hard in the book when I read that line. Just visualizing that, I was just busting out. So.
And some of that kept me grounded to here. I'm thinking I'm so dangerous. I'm so changing the world. I'm so and then I go back and with one word she puts me in my place. So that was a great thing.
Yeah. Are you still haunted by your parents? Do little lines like that still crop up in your head and put you take you out of wherever you are as a closing in on 60 adult?
Oh yeah, all the time, and now it's a different world where you face almost generational things. Where my wife and I would do a lot of activist volunteer work with a group called Rise and Resist, and in particular we do a lot of for immigration rights and immigrant rights, and I think about it personally because my parents had to really deal with the first and God help us maybe the last American law that made it illegal for one race of people to become citizens here, the Chinese Exclusion Act. And I look at what immigrants are going through now, and even within people of my generation, sometimes they try to say, well, our parents, they were nothing like these immigrants. I said, no, it's exactly the same. We are dealing with the same issues, the same things now. So I know, of course, I think about them a lot. And of course, throughout the course of this book, I thought about them a very lot. So and so it's hard. It's, we can never change it, but I wonder if I was not writing this book, if how much they would have stayed with me. But they stay with me on a very granular level. I think about them a lot, of course. But I like to think it's not haunted, but really it's a very comforting voice. And as we get and also now I'm glad I passed my father and his father. They died when they were 59, so I was always dreading this year in some ways.
Yeah, I could see that being if I just make it this far, I've it's house money after that.
No, absolutely. In our darker human days, some of my siblings, I used to say, so there's no need for us to talk about our IRAs or Roth IRAs. Grandpa and dad died at 59, so we don't deal with this stuff.
Yeah, how have your siblings reacted to the book?
They haven't read it yet, so we'll see.
I was wondering whether you sort of vetted with them or sent earlier drafts or anything, because there's nothing that seems too, to me, nothing that seems too intrusive about them. But wasn't sure if they were going to have a different perspective.
Oh, glad to hear that. No, and with my older brother Gene in particular, we don't talk so much anymore. But I did a lot of research with him because he knew a lot of the stories. And sadly, a lot of my siblings did not get along. And I could tell when some things were really true. When some sibling, when who did not like the other one, would express sympathy for them. In recalling family histories and things. So I was talking to them all to try and get as much as I could out of it. And one thing, a bigger source came from, I had an extended family. It's not in the book, but a few years ago, I was in time flies, about like 12 years ago now. I was in this midlife crisis rock band. We were all middle-aged guys, and we're all Asian. And some of them were long-time lifelong Chinatown people. I wanted to call the band the Asian American Rock Party, AARP, but yeah. But the lead guitarist was the most graying at that time, and he was not laughing. He said, "Oh, come on, we're going to pretend we're 30, going to pretend we're 40 again." But we would play in Chinatown, and we also wanted to continue to take the piss. Like we were all Asian guys, and we covered Iggy Pop and David Bowie's China Girl and stuff. And then one night they said, "Your cousin's here," and I felt so removed. I thought that in the Jim Jarmusch film Strangers in Paradise, and the guys keep saying, "I don't even have any family. I don't feel like I have that." I felt like that, and I said, "My cousin." It took me a minute to calculate that, and I said, "Oh my God!" And he was a Chinatown lifer too, so we got to be friends again. They're just they have this enormous family. They're 7 siblings, and what they do is on Thanksgiving Day they all go to their in-laws, and then on Saturday they have this grand gathering, and they started inviting my wife Wendy and I to it. And there I found out a lot about our family history, and from a different perspective. Like growing up in Chinatown, they did in the 60s and 70s. For them, going to Flushing, Queens was like going to the country. It was like, they still talk about it with such. I was like, you thought Flushing was beautiful? Oh my God! And they, I didn't know what an impact it had on them. They learned how to ride bikes out in Flushing and everything. It's like, oh my God! And one of them loved it so much that they tried to run away. They did run away. Like we were savvy kids. I guess arriving Chinatown in the 70s, that was a whole other battle.
Yeah.
Oh my God! And one of them, like definitely before the age of 10, maybe even 8 or 9, navigated the subway all the way out to Flushing from Chinatown. He wanted to run away. And they felt, of course, I was too young to remember this, but they obviously wanted to heal him. So what they did was they secretly told his parents that we've got him, he's safe here, but they didn't blow his cover. They let him stay out there a few days.
Yeah.
And just to
realize that, Flushing is maybe not all it's cracked up to be. He'll go back home. But.
Yes, but then hearing about, I got a lot from them. Like they said at those early parties, like I said, my dad was the life of the party. He said, like, the whole time I know him, he said to me maybe like 1,000 words over 10 years, but he was the life of the party. He dressed like Frank Sinatra and played those records. It's like, I never knew that guy. And of course, like, we go through the same experiences, but we obviously all have different interpretations of what they are. So when I heard some of these things, it was very, very revealing to me, get in touch with this branch of the family and the cousins, just to get a little, an inside-outside perspective on our family. It's like, oh my God.
Do you feel you've satiated the memoir bug at this point, or you're going to keep exploring family and relation to who you are?
No, I'd like to keep exploring it on a different level. Like this is definitely about the family and really how I related to that, and just the whole other chapter. Like I got married later in life, so that opens up a whole new world too. So that was there's that. But I think there's more, definitely more nonfiction. Maybe not all memoir, but definitely nonfiction. And
what are the, I'll say, challenges / benefits of a double arts family in terms of you and your wife?
Oh, I guess the benefits far outweigh anything. Like the best thing is we understand the craziness and instability of this life. So yeah, I guess so much you could stop right there. We know what it's about, and because we both come from the theater, like we know it's about the process here and now, and just understanding just that whole disposition. So that's been a blessing to have that.
Do you wish you'd encountered theater earlier, or was Tommy, concept records, Cantonese opera a good sideways entry into that world?
No, absolutely. And also back then, we're older. This is the pre-MTV generation. So in some ways, I really learned the power of the stage from a lot of rock and roll. And back, I use that word every day now. Back then.
When I was young.
No, exactly. And when I was young, rock and roll was more like performance art. Like they weren't just out there just promoting their records and trying to recreate their music videos on stage. It was something a little more dangerous, more open-ended. Like you didn't want to hear the record. You wanted to hear something, dangerous and different. I just learned the power of that too. And I guess just like the Batman moment with my mother, luckily starting to go through theater, I would see how, I loved being in this moment and how things were changing for me. But also there were always reminders that things are very different. Like I remember, I was very lucky. A lot of good things came through my Flushing High School forum, the newspaper there. For some reason, I don't know why they were doing that, but they reached out to us to review a solo play about Woody Guthrie at the Cherry Lane Theater. Like, why they reached out? So I'm so glad they did. But it's like, wow, they wanted to. So, and when I saw that and heard the power of Woody Guthrie in those songs, I said, this is just like punk rock. This is moving me just as strongly as that. And then at that time, there was this great documentary called Blast Waltz with the band. And I remember I'd never seen anything before or since the power when Muddy Waters did Manish Boys. Like this is as powerful as any punk rock thing I've ever seen. And so luckily through cultural, just looking at different things, there's always been those reminders that yes, your moment is vital. Of course, you have to do this, but these things have happened before too.
Yeah, I did. Again, seeing your, we'll say, progression, because one of the interesting things to me, and I unfortunately still fall into this, is that transition from classic rock to prog rock over to punk, where we all have that regret about prog rock and what it was, but you've got your Rick Wakeman experience in there. You've got,
yes.
And I'm a guy who's asked my Amazon Echo to play Starship Troopers every so often. So yeah, I get. I might be the only. It even says that back to me with derision. It's like, really, that's what you want to hear?
Go play it yourself.
Yeah, it's just one of those like, I've got all the technology in the world, and you want to hear this from the '70s. But yeah, it's that theatricality that rock had. I mean, I still contend "Bat Out of Hell" is the greatest rock and roll album for that type of rock and roll ever, but only because it's bringing that bombast and operatic vibe to
no,
a piece of
absolutely, and they both came from the theater, and condolences they both passed, and no, but I know my Rick Wakeman moment, yes, and Starship Trooper. That was the only song I could play because the ending is 3 chords. The big
it's that repetitive thing that goes on and on.
That's the only that and You and I. Those are the only progressions I could play. All the other ones are way too complicated. No, but I guess maybe we all went through this too, being similar generations. Like having to buy my Pink Floyd records twice. I was when I became punk, it's almost like a revolution. It's like, let's throw everything out, and it's like, okay. Yeah. A few years later, I bought a lot of those records again. So
you realize that there was merit to a lot of these things. You just had to find them at the right time in your own life.
No, and that is true. When Herb Alpert was a guest speaker in our graduate program, I remember talking to him. You could see his face went blank, like talking about Rick Wakeman and Journey to Century Earth. I don't think he even knew that his company put it out. He's going, Rick. He's thinking Rick Wakeman. Was he one of the Carpenters' musical arrangers? Who was Rick Wakeman? I was thinking, but
a number of laugh out loud moments in the book. That was among them. Yeah, that tumbleweeds moment with Alpert. But,
yes. I'm so glad. And really, thank you for having me. And so glad that the book resonated with you.
Well, one of the things I'm most interested in, or the sort of the era and the genre, is just that 80s into 90s performance art period in New York, where you capture a bunch of that and a lot of the tensions that were going on culturally, nationally around this. But it got me wondering, like, who or what do you miss most from the performance art heyday? When things were really at their peak for that form.
Oh, it was just so open ended, and just last night was my wife's birthday. She's a Cinco de Mayo baby, and we're talking about how I think in the 80s, concurrent with that, the restaurants took over performance art and everything as the main event, and because of that, in the 80s and late 80s and early 90s, you had all these amazing hole-in-the-wall performance spaces. So you can go see all these different things, and there were plenty of places for artists and audiences to develop. And you just don't have that anymore. And of course, with audiences comes a community. And also, I guess the internet too, to really get your ear to the ground, see what's going on, you actually had to get out there and go to things. I mean, don't get me, I'm in between. I'm not a Luddite, but I'm far from a high-tech person. But of course,
we're doing this.
Yes,
we're doing this remotely. So we have to make our concessions. But
no, absolutely. So yes, there are many great things, but I guess I miss that. And of course, we can't change the way we grew up. So we love that. I love the word of mouth and just that there was voice to everyone, and just in some ways there was all of that, and you could develop, and there was just a way to say, okay, you can be here. Like I always say, before you can be successful, you have to be, and there was just a place to be with that, and for a while, even MTV even impacted the performance spoken word scene.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess there's I guess everyone's going to be. I guess anytime there's a new thing, like there's going to be the commercial. I guess the commercial brass ring gets dangled, and then all of a sudden you have people competing for it, and that causes divides. But I guess I just love that there was this places for voices, and you were just discovering everything and discovering everyone, and it wasn't just about wanting to be successful. It's really just wanting to represent, really have your voice heard, and really be a part of this conversation. And I feel like because there's so few spaces now and so fewer opportunities, it's so much is success based and everything too. Even down to I'm sure like all of us, we have very 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 complicated mixed relationships with social media. Like the fact that you could count every like, it's very weird.
Yeah. Oh, it's something I've talked about on the show before. I've had one of the great kings of zines and comics, John Porcellino. He really went into this a whole bunch of years ago on the show about how when he started in the late 80s, early 90s, publishing his zine, you mailed it out. And maybe 3 months later, somebody wrote you a letter about how much they liked it. Maybe it was a cartoonist you really liked who got your zine and sent you a note about it. That meant everything. And now it's how many likes did I get in the first hour? And, just that immediate metric. It's just, we don't want to say those goddamn kids today, but
I know
it's a very different thing, to let something go. When somebody emails me saying they heard a show from like 5 years ago because they were searching for artist X and they came across the episode, it almost means more to me than, seeing like a big pop in the first week
Right.
for a show. Yeah, this lasted, and over time somebody found it and it resonated with them and meant something. But again, we're old.
No, so. No, absolutely. And you've created such a great body of work. I was looking at the amount of interviews. It's amazing. That's incredible what you've done with this.
Some would say obsessive and megalomaniacal, but whatever. Yeah, that's cool.
but in some ways now, even though it's been about 6 years, so it's still so weird to still say the late Leonard Cohen. He was such a big influence on me. He always says, he said there's fine wine in every generation. He always said that, and I think I feel more hopeful now. You hate to. Obviously, the pandemic happened, or everything else happened. 2016 happened, and but now I think we're in a place now where, and I do teach theater at both Marymount Manhattan College and at BMCC CUNY, and I think now for the first time in a long time, people just want to again have their voices heard and represent, and they're looking for more authenticity than just only commercialism. And I'm very hopeful about that. I think the reckoning we've all gone through in the past few years from George Floyd and everything, I think it's really made people say, really, what we have to say is important. It's not just about selling tickets, or even getting likes. It's really there's something else to it.
Yeah, and I'll ask about teaching after this. I got a note to do that, but when you mention 2016 and onwards and the pandemic, what is it like being a American of Chinese descent in your world today?
Oh, it's tough. Like obviously a friend, I've had two friends. They're both Asian women who were assaulted on the streets, and it's and one of them, they always say it's not a court of justice, it's a court of law. One of them saying because this perpetrator did not use any verbal slurs, they could not pursue this as a hate crime. It's like, oh, come on. The woman was walking in Chinatown, 68-year-old woman by herself, and she got punched in the face and had to go to the hospital. It was, no, it's a rough time. I am 6 foot, but I still I look, like if you notice, I think on every subway platform, the people standing furthest away from the train are all Asian people, like when the train comes in. And I do look around, and even that's the other underside, like even a lot of street savvy friends, they'll say they're trying not to take the subways at night, and particularly a lot of Asian friends too. So it's been a tough time too, with the pandemic being labeled as the Chinese flu and everything. It's been a very, very tough time. It's made us but the good thing out of that is, again, it's been it's horrible. At least I like the cultural and social pushback where I just moderated a panel at Manhattan Theater Club about AAPI Heritage Month, and this has been a banner year. There's been so many Asian American theater productions. There's since February, I've seen 8 theater productions that have been Asian American, and I think it also brings us into a term now too, where I guess a great thing about the internet and everything is just by nature of things have to become more global and more elastic in their definitions. Like in many ways, you could say even the term Asian American grew out of the civil rights movement, and at that time, a mentor to me, he sadly just passed away, named Jeff Chan. He was a pioneer in Asian American literature and Asian American studies. He was the co-founder of one of the first Asian American Studies program at San Francisco State that evolved out of the 1968 riots there and all that. And he said back in the 70s, writing was fighting. Like you really was it was all about representation that way. But now there's different global things, and there's much more awareness, and I think there's much more sensitivity too to everything. Like even like some of the students now, they're saying one woman saying a number of years ago when I was in high school, I was in she's not Latinx. She said, but I was in a production of In the Heights, and I wouldn't even dream of auditioning for that now. So I think there's a higher consciousness and respect for that now.
Yeah, and it's something you bring up in the book, certainly around M. Butterfly and we'll just say Asian representation in the theater, and not just on stage, but the number of things you're seeing written and staged. There's so many more voices, and again, as the token or as the white guy, a token white guy, talking about diversity and voices, etc. It sounds like platitudes coming from me, but over the course of the book, in the second half, as you begin your exploration in theater, you sort of track that evolution, or almost get carried along with it in terms of this is a moment where we can start, making our voices heard.
No, absolutely, and I also and I think the way you have your voices heard is also true in whatever way it is. That's why, like diversity and the big three: diversity, equity, inclusion.
Right.
It's a slippery slope though too, because yes, we want authenticity, but at the same time, like as an Asian American playwright, I don't want to be told you stay in your lane. You only write about Asian, quote unquote, Asian American.
Yeah, that's what I was
characters.
wondering, like how you tread that line, how you balance that.
Oh no, I just think even when I try to do what I call I'm teaching an Asian American theater course now at Marymount, and I purposely call my sub theme is entering a dialogue with Asian America through theater. So I say you're not trying to say I am this thing. You're trying to have a dialogue with this, and I think that's important. Like the same thing. Like I don't want to be told to only write about that. Another great coincidence we have. I've been writing a series of plays called Portrait Plays, and one of them is about Alice Neal. And I loved your interview with was it Julie Phillips? That was incredible.
Yeah, the one just last week where she's got a big Alice Neal section.
I clicked on that. I saw the cover. I was like, oh my god, I've got to hear this. What is this about? And so in particular, her portrait of Joe Gould, and that to me that was a life change, and it's just a thing where I feel like. And I guess it comes back to the book too. Like I'll just get back to those plays in a second. I feel like if I had to choose one category for this book, even I know it's obviously a lot of Chinese American experience, but I like to think at the end of the day, it's a New York City book. I really feel I feel like that captures all the themes in it. Of course, a memoir is going to have many different things, but all like being a Chinese American growing up when I did, all about in the theater, just in the streets, and I feel like at the end of the day, maybe the one category that can encompass all of that is New York City, and so I like to think that that's what it is, and just with the other element too, like I felt it was a different liberation. Like interesting, right after we got back from Hong Kong in 2011, I felt like that was a great capstone, let's say, to that chapter, that era, or the first 49 years of my life, the first quarter of my life, and I did different things, and then I started doing these things of where I called the portrait plays, and they're sort of historical dramas about artists and portraiture, and I felt liberated in a way though too, where I was very proud of that, and I'm going to get back to writing more what Asian American characters and themes, but I wanted to write about different things, like the first play, Three Trees, and that was just published too. It's published by, do you know the playwright Caridad Savich? She no. She's a really prominent. She does it all. She's a great playwright. She's translated Lorca. She's done all these things, but also she has her own press called No Passport Press, and they published my play Three Trees, which is the first of that. And I'll be happy to send you a copy of that too. And
that'd be great.
Yeah, and this really looks at Giacometti. For a while, he was obsessed with this Japanese philosopher named Isago Yanahara, and it really changed his life, and both his professional and personal life, and let them both change. So I thought that was very important. And then, thankfully, it was just a 4-character play, and only one of them is Asian, the Japanese philosopher. But yet, the Pan Asian Repertory Theater, they still produced this off Broadway. So I was very hopeful with that. I said, okay, that people want to expand what the definitions are, so to speak, And then the second one, that's why I loved it, is called 33 1/3 Cornelia Street, and it's about Alice Neal and the time when she was to me, I'm sure you know Joe Gould's Secret with the great yeah. And I feel like the missing link in that whole odyssey was after Joseph Mitchell published Joe Gould's Secret, and apparently he still went to New York for like 30 years and never published another word. And then
back in the day when a magazine could support that, but go on.
No, exactly, and it had far-reaching things like in Bright Lights, Big City. Yes, if we could own up to Rick Wakeman, we could own up to Bright Lights, Big City too.
For all of our time, it's okay, man.
Obviously he's interning or at the New Yorker, and next door to his office is our third person speaking protagonist is a character they called the Ghost, and that to me that the Ghost was Joseph Mitchell. Like every day he'd show up and you'd hear him sharpen a few pencils, and then you'd hear a few bottles clink, but he wouldn't produce anything. But I think to me the missing link was I believe after his initial story in Joe Gould came out, Joseph Mitchell's, he finally went over and saw Alice Neal's portrait of Joe Gould, that wild portrait. I don't know if you've seen that, where he has some,
Yeah.
And
The three sets of genitals and the sort of demonic demeanor. Yeah.
Exactly. And I said, this is representative painting. I was like, so this is and to me, I felt like when Joseph Mitchell saw Alice's portrait, I think he felt that, wow, Alice got Joe Gould, and Joe Gould played me. I felt like, so we look at those. So those are the three main characters: Alice Neal, Joseph Mitchell, and Joe Gould. So I feel like just the way to be able to explore these things, I feel that's part of our voice too. And I think that's great when we can do whatever we like. Of course, how actors navigate this is a totally different thing because they just can't do that. So it's but I like to think that for writers, I think for all of us, yes, we want to have authenticity, but we have to be able to exchange ideas, exchange cultures, and I think so. I really think the phrase of we're entering a dialogue with this. We're not saying I am this thing, but I want to enter a dialogue with that.
Yeah, what was it like, I guess, using, one art form to interrogate or examine another with the course of the portrait plays? And at what point does the research that you engage in, become a little too much research or too much rabbit hole to fall down?
No, absolutely. It took a long time to come to that, but I feel like any creative artist, whether it's verbal, visual, music, dance, in some ways, we're all creating portraits, and and people just say maybe the longest journey is from your mind to your hand, whether you're trying to write something or draw something or create choreography or sculpt something. And people who've created this amazing bodies of work, they still say, I've only captured like maybe a quarter of what's in my heart, mind, and soul. I'm trying to interpret that. So I feel like we're all just trying to do portraits of what's inside us. And then at a certain point, I think it's just like life. You need to be prepared up the wazoo, but then when you get there, most times you have to improvise. So but of course, the more you're prepared, the better you can improvise. And I just felt I said, well, the whole portraiture process is so fascinating to me, and but I know on stage, like visually and physically, it's very static, a lot of it. But then when I interviewed a lot of artists, it said the energy in that room, they're saying it's such a high energy, such an intense, intimate thing. So I was looking for a way to capture that, and then it was just a blessing of our marriage. We went to Paris for our honeymoon, and there was a great exhibition about the Atelier Giacometti, and a few blocks away, it was at Pompidou. I don't know how they did this, but some things never changed. Once Alberto Giacometti died, they evicted the whole family. But somehow, his wife and his brother had the smarts. Somehow Giacometti would do all these crazy sketches on the walls and everything, and they took those sketches somehow. I don't know how they did that. I was like, how did they do this? And at the show at Pompidou, they recreated that atelier, and I was like, wow. And then when I read about this this very haunting, this very intense relationship with Isako Yanairo, I said, okay, that's the first portrait play that led to so many other things. So I just think I just love how to again. I just wanted to enter a dialogue with these paintings, with these great works too, and so then how can we do that? And just like we try to enter a dialogue with music, all that. So yes, I guess what I tell my students too is now, I guess research is only as good as the application of it. You have to have it, of course, but then now more than ever, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's easier to research things. And back when we were young, it's much easier to research things now. And but now more than ever, because everyone has access to so much information. I guess how you process and apply that is everything now, more than ever.
Yeah, it's all that distillation or refinement, or not, falling into excessive detail, and again, the rabbit hole aspect that I alluded to, because it's too easy to just, well, if I just read a little more, I'll find the thing that I need, versus having confidence in your own
no, absolutely.
Artistic creation.
And I think one thing that keeps me grounded is one of the fundamentals of playwriting, and it was called, what is the spine of your play? And obviously what to keep in, what to keep out is just in some ways, a simple question to ask, a hard one to answer. But it says, does every utterance, every line, every gesture, does it connect to the spine of my play, either indirectly or directly? Does it reinforce that spine? And that's a good principle to go by. Like what to include. And again, that was a fascinating interview about dramaturgy. That was an amazing podcast you did.
Oh, with Anne Catania, yeah.
Yes.
And as you probably sussed out, I don't have a history in theater or anything, and so just her book and that conversation just opened me up to so much of what goes into not just the acting, but everything that grounds these things, and what goes into the script and what goes into to understanding who you're playing and how.
Mm, that's great. And not being from the theater, how did you choose her in that book for one of your podcasts?
Oh, well, that's the great aspect of the podcast is a pal of mine a guy I recorded with a few years earlier gave me her name and said, she's got a book coming out in a few years on being a dramaturg. And I know nothing about this. It's probably fascinating. And then, I put it in the great spreadsheet that knows all, which is how I track all this stuff. And then, I saw her name come up. I forget if it was Yale University Press or another press that was publishing the book. I thought, oh, that book's finally coming out. I gotta hit her up, and turned into this wonderful conversation. One of the few in-person ones I've done since the pandemic. But yeah, it was just great sitting down and learning about a literary field that I knew nothing about. Sometimes the field is completely, distant from anything that I'm interested in or, have a background in. This is close enough and yet alien to me. And it was just wonderful to experience that with her. But along those lines, you talk about working with actors. You also done monologues of your own. How I'd say, I guess, how different is that writing for one voice versus writing for multiple voices?
Oh yeah.
And that sense of control versus what you have to give up, I guess.
Oh yes. I'm very careful to always say I'm a performer because I always I go back to I love the Lou Reed adage. Lou Reed used to say, "I do Lou Reed better than anybody," And at that time he said it, all over the world there was someone on a rock and roll stage trying to do Lou Reed at that time. There was always that happening. So I like to think I'm a performer, but that's to me a very different discipline and art form than being an actor. And so you write accordingly. And I guess I was lucky. I like having both, that I could do my performance things. So I don't feel like I have to be in a play. And also as you get older, you welcome the collaboration more too. And hopefully comes of a combination. You learn to trust the process, and you get confident enough in your own craft that that what you want to be there is there. And then you want to welcome. I guess because I'm lucky to have my own expression. I do my own solo shows, my acoustic punk rock and tour shows. That I have that performance there where I can let go a little more as a playwright, and I welcome actors' interpretations and certainly directors and designers' interpretations of that work. And I like being part of that collaborative process too.
Yeah, it's always that challenge for me, being a micromanaging control freak. The idea of being willing to collaborate that much and work and get something greater than you could produce, just on your own in terms of that gestalt, what comes out of working with others in a really good environment.
Absolutely, there's something like that. And just to hear, I always make the analogy again, like going back to songwriters and composers and playwrights. Like you've got your script on the page, you got the score, the notes and the words, but then how it comes off that page is everything, and there's so many ways for it to come off the page, and just that's such a fascinating process. That's what I love about both. I've always loved music, and then theater has the same thing. That's why another thing I love about songwriting and playwriting is again, you have the solitude of creation, but then you have the great collaboration, ultimately the spectacle of live performance. I just love that both mediums have that.
So tell me about theater during the pandemic. When did you finally go back? What did you go see? How tough was it not being able to be in an audience or to be connected to the stage?
No, it was tough. It was tough for that. But then it was. I guess the one good thing about it was all of a sudden everyone was unloading their archives onto the internet. You could see,
yeah,
it was amazing. Like there were great productions of the Tom Waits, William S. Burroughs opera, the Black Rider. You find these amazing productions like from Germany and things, and so that was one good thing. I mean, thankfully these archival sources exist, but because nothing could ever replace just the visceral experience of live theater. Nothing could ever replace that, and so that was tough to do. But there was so much other things going on, and then I guess the first thing back was last fall, I went to the New York Theater Workshop. It was a great production of a thing called Sweatshop Overlord by Christina Wong, and it because it was just so great to be in the theater again. But it touched on so many things. Like it's based on the series of essays and a whole, not just series of essays, but essays about their campaign called the Anti-Sewing Squad. Was AUNTIE. It was a great book, actually. The Anti-Sewing Squad Guide to Mask Making, Radical Care, and Racial Justice. And they talked about how these Asian women got together to make masks and really support the Asian community through the pandemic. This is out in California. And then she has a great sense of humor, and she and then the way she said, "Wow, I'm supervising all these Asian women. I'm like running my own sweatshop here." And
then, yeah, you hate when things invert like that, but
but she has such a great human sense of humor about that. She called her show "Sweatshop Overlord," and I think that was a very healing thing. It was so healing in so many ways for that to be my first in-person theater experience indoors too. I must have been a little freaked out to go back inside. This is last October. But it was just again such the healing power of theater. I love what it was doing, how she was able to take the piss of herself, but really speak to the moment too, where she said just by calling herself a sweatshop overlord, but then what it was about, these Asian women fighting back during the pandemic, during all that, and just to get masks to underserved communities, and that was the way they could mobilize. But that was also about California. They all went into their backyards and started sewing. It's like in New York City, we can't do that.
Yeah.
So that
it's there's a lot different here. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yes. Do you have access to outdoors where you live? Is it easier for you?
Oh, I live out in the woods.
Oh, okay.
The flip side, well, it's great because I can just go out and go anywhere and not worry about exposure. The downside is I don't have friends. So, you sort of lose your mind being out in the woods, but at least you're safe from COVID.
Right.
Yeah, it's a trade-off. And I can always see New York in the distance from just a little distance from my house. But it's one of those, there's the city. I'll be back there someday. Yeah, it's everything has trade-offs to it. But I guess just last couple questions, because I don't want to keep you too long. Teaching playwriting, and how that's changed for you, what you had to learn in order to teach, and sort of how the students have changed over the time you've been teaching.
No, you really have to, they're definitely, as you know, person to be a great playwright, but not necessarily a great teacher of it, and then vice versa. You could be a great teacher of playwriting, not necessarily a great playwright. However, you of course determine what is great, but you really have to learn how to articulate things and understand on a real primal level. How to articulate that and convey that is it's its own series of learning, and you learn so much about yourself and about your process by having to articulate that and having to really help other people on that journey. And of course it's changed with the times too, and just the nature of teaching too. They used to say it was always I guess two categories. You were either the sage on the stage or the guide on the side, and and you learn to choose those two. And I think as you get more more grounded in your own process as a teacher, that comes about, and you realize everyone always says it, but a lot of people don't live up to it. But it is much more about process than about product. And I really think that also too, just like hopefully what we all aspire to do is, yes, in some ways. Our subject today is sounds like a sermon. Our subject today is theater and playwriting. But I like to think at the end of the day, every classroom, every teacher, every teaching situation, we're all just teaching about the human experience, about life. But in this case, it's how do we examine and observe that, and then process and apply it through our medium, whether it's playwriting, whether it's calculus, whatever it is you're teaching. So I think it's all about that, and hopefully you're always contributing to, not just great artists. Yes, we aspire and work hard to hopefully contribute to this conversation, this history by creating great artists. But also, you can't be great artists without being a great human. So you really want to hopefully how they grow, and also, in theater studies, you realize that not everyone's going to go into the field. So I like to think that I try to ground it in ways that how can what we do in the theater apply to the rest of these spheres of life. And of course, theater is everything. It can really apply to everything. So I try to really keep all these, it's a lot to keep juggling, but I always try to keep these things in mind, and it makes you more mindful of your own process as you go too.
Yeah. So I always wonder that first that sense of, holy crap, am I qualified to teach? And then, what you learn in the process of teaching others. And, it sounds like you've really taken a lot out of, again, what it means, not just to perform, or not just to write to perform, but, to translate and transform what you've experienced and what you've seen in others.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why the Hong Kong was such a watershed thing, like going just to be able to teach. And also, that was also the first time that Wendy and I worked together in a classroom too. So there was so many things going on. And I realized a lot of those students had never even seen a play or a musical. And it was a very different thing. And so just learning to do that on a global level. And of course, you didn't have all the ready at hand New York City references that you could fall back on.
That you're I've had the same thing with like cartoonists when I realized they've come from something other than the American tradition, and it's your framework is completely, or you don't even have all of these examples and references. We need to establish things in a different language.
No, absolutely. Growing up when we did, like in the late 20th century in America and in New York City, we just assume that we are the center of the universe. America is the center of the universe, and New York City is certainly the center of America. And so it's been very humbling in some ways, but also very different to really learn how that meets out in the rest of the world. And so just coming from that place, like we were the center of the world. We had to be this, and then you go to other places, and as the old song says, it ain't necessarily so.
Okay, so last question. Now that we're older, Tommy or Quadrophenia?
Tough one.
Because same as you, Tommy was the bomb for me. And I was, I came to it, again, 8 or 9 years old, but in the Walkman era. Mm-hmm. So everything was on headphones, melting my brain at that point. But again, now that we've put on a bunch of years,
yes,
Quadrophenia over Tommy, or vice versa?
Tommy was more influential, but I think Quadrophenia.
Yeah,
Quadrophenia.
That's my take. It's the better. I don't even want to say rock opera, whatever you want to call it. It's the better album.
No, absolutely. But with all due respect, Pete Townsend wrote that he wrote Tommy when he was like 23.
Yeah, that always sucks.
Yeah, I know. It's like, no, I can't believe that. Like, actually, I got to interview Des McAnuff, who directed the time. Also, I was so, as I said in the book, I was so thrilled to see it there. I was like but I was like, oh man, even Des McAnuff said that they would joke that, yes, this is the Edward Scissorhands Tommy. They knew they were cleaning it up. They knew. So I was like, what happens? Like, how could this be? I thought, and I just thought, not just 22, but I thought he had such insights there that realizing the fake guru thing going on in Tommy and everything. It's like, wow. And so, yes, that was more influential in my life, but Quadrophenia is an amazing, amazing thing. That is, yeah. Then, and I got to see them do Quadrophenia fully too. My other life was I was a rock journalist for many years too.
Oh yeah, I meant to go into a whole side thing about that, but that'll be our next conversation.
Oh, that'd be great. Oh, that'd be great. No, this is great, and you can, and I have to ask, thank you. I'm honored to be part of this great roster. How did you come to this book? May I ask?
Oh gosh, I think it was just your publicist.
Oh, great.
Who knows me? I have to go look. The one upshot of doing these things remotely is that I can goof around on the internet. I mean, do research on the internet while talking to the guest. But let me see. I'm going to look up Alvin. I think it's just that it was the Jennifer Richards reached out and just said, we've got this book and this guy is great. You should go talk to him. And, here we are.
Oh, great.
So
well, thank you.
PR does work.
Yes.
But, and they're a firm that they know what sort of writers and artists are going to work for me in terms of a conversation. So it's not just here's everybody we have, but they do tend to guess Gil's going to have a good time talking to this person.
Oh, so. And for what it's worth, she was very happy that you said yes, as am I too. So thank you so much, and hope I didn't ramble or speak too quickly for you too many times.
Oh God, no! I slowed down for you. It's okay. No, trust me, we could have gone 200 miles an hour faster in our conversation, but I figured there's an audience. We should slow down some.
Oh, great! No, and I just love how wide ranging your podcasts are. You cover so much ground. It's really it's an honor to have this conversation. I look forward to more, and one day maybe we'll get to meet each other in person one of these years too.
And that was Alvin Eng. His new book is Our Laundry, Our Town, My Chinese American Life from Flushing to the Downtown Stage and Beyond, from Fordham University Press. It's awfully enjoyable, like I say, capturing the hyphenated experience, or hyphenated American experience, and that unique, weird time for performance art and way off-Broadway productions in New York. It's this really amazing encapsulation of that era, especially that 80s into 90s stretch. And anyway, you can learn more about Alvin and his work at alvineng.com, which is ALVINENG.com. He's on Twitter as Alvin Eng 8, the number 8, and on Instagram as alvin.eng8. I'll have links to all that in the show and episode notes for this one. Now, you can support the Virtual Memories show by telling other people about it. Just let them know there's this podcast out there where this guy interviews interesting writers, artists, cartoonists, musicians, whoever, every single week. You can also help out the show by telling me what you like and don't like about it, and what person you'd like to hear me record with, or what movie or TV show or play or book or piece of music or art exhibition or whatever you think I should turn listeners on to. And you can do that by email, by postcard or letter, or by leaving me a message at my Google Voice number, which is 973-869-9659. Let's see, that goes directly to voicemail, so you don't have to worry about me picking up and getting stuck in an awkward conversation. It also, messages can only be up to 3 minutes long, so if you're going to go really long, call back and leave another message. Also, let me know if it would be okay to include your message in an upcoming episode of the show. I would never do that without the speaker's permission, but if you've got something you want the listeners to hear, fire away. And if you've got money to spare, don't give it to me. My day job treats me fine. My expenses are pretty minimal for the show. I hope if you've got money to spare, you'll help other people. You can do that either by helping individuals or by reaching out and donating to institutions. You can find people through GoFundMe, Patreon, Kickstarter, Topato Go, and other crowdfunding platforms. If you're looking for somewhere to start with institutions or foundations, I give to my local food bank. I give sometimes to the Poor People's Campaign. There are a whole lot of other things you can do. Freedom funds, election funds, Amnesty Project, Planned Parenthood, and other women's choice funds. There are a lot of things you can donate to that'll help us work towards a better world. So I hope you will. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You should visit my archives to check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018 and learn more about his art and painting. And you can listen to his music at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at vmspod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, talk it up on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.